Okay, good afternoon everybody. Thanks for joining us for this webinar on tracking student wellbeing. My name's Selena Fisk. I'm a school data coach and consultant, and what I normally do is I normally work with schools in learning analytics, and that's kind of, I guess, how I got into this role in the first place. But increasingly schools are seeking ways of tracking student wellbeing and are increasingly interested in looking at how their students are tracking both in the classroom and in terms of their wellbeing, and wanting to see that really kind of holistic picture of how the students are getting along. So what we've got this afternoon is a couple of different awesome people who are doing some really great stuff in their work with schools that I'd love to share with you. And I'm going to talk a little bit through there about the Australian Student Wellbeing Framework, share some examples of some tracking that I've done in a school that I'm working with at the moment. But really encourage you to get involved in the conversation, ask any questions in the chat on the right, add any reflections, and all the providers will be hanging around at 6. And yeah, if you don't get a chance to talk to them now, you're welcome to hang around and we can give you all their contact details at the end. So we all know why student wellbeing is so important. We know that it's inextricably linked to achievement and outcomes, and the whole growth and development of them as humans. The first person we're going to speak to today is Nicola Bone. And Nicola runs Sound Off for Schools, which is an awesome program where she goes into schools, or her teachers go into schools, and she runs mindfulness sessions for kids with the express intent of actively working on and developing their well-being. So I'm just going to quickly... So I'll just play this. This is about a minute long.
As you breathe in, sit tall through your spine. Fill up with a sense of gratitude for this very moment in time. Exhale to relax your shoulders and release any worries or anxieties. Continue to settle your attention on the rhythm of your own breath. Sound Off for Schools, the silent revolution rewriting our nation's educational story. Find out more today.
Nicola is awesome at what she does, and I'm so lucky to have her here, or we're so lucky to have her here today. Nicola, do you want to share a little bit about what you do, and I guess even just why you started and where you come from in this wellbeing space?
Yeah, thank you. Firstly, thank you, Selena, for creating this opportunity for us all to connect, and especially on this topic that I'm very passionate about, student wellbeing. So Sound Off for Schools doesn't specifically track wellbeing. However, we started this program in response to an overwhelming need for student and teacher wellbeing to be at the forefront, the absolute forefront of what we do as educational leaders. During my 12 years of classroom practice, I saw a really obvious and significant decline in wellbeing, in the wellbeing of students and also my colleagues. So at the time I was completing my Master of Public Health, and this concern for mental health in particular of young people was emerging as a very alarming burden on the education system. So fast forward through all the research, pilot programs, the development of the content, in a nutshell, we deliver practical and engaging mindfulness education programs to students and teachers. So the Sound Off for School program content is kind of driven by 3 different things. Cognitive neuroscience, so the notion that the brain can change, and we empower young people with knowledge about neuroplasticity. Educational psychology, understanding how young people best learn and priming the brain for that. And then pedagogical practice, so knowing how to engage and deliver to this generation of learners, which are vastly different to perhaps the teacher in front of them. The way that they learn is changing all the time. So each session is designed for the specific context, so the school that we're in at the time. And it can include the explicit teaching of a range of social and emotional skills. We focus on the development of emotional regulation, cognitive awareness, resilience, compassion, gratitude, and schools have the opportunity to design their own sessions or programs so that we're delivering something that's engaging and relevant for those actual students and teachers at that time. So at the moment, we're offering incursion programs, retreat days, workshops, staff PD. So we like to see that teachers have the confidence and the skills to do this every day with their young people in the classroom. And some schools are now even opting for our plug and play program, which is where they have mindfulness meditation is actually in the timetable. And we've seen a number of schools in Brisbane, they've committed to, this year they've committed to 2 5-minute sessions every day. So first thing in the morning and then first thing after lunch. And the results and the feedback from those schools is just incredible. Having that deliberate time and space for young people to sit in stillness and contemplate and be calm and peaceful just does wonders for their learning. I won't take up any more of your time. So that is really a really quick overview. Selena's going to give you all of our contact details if you would like any further information, or if you'd even like to book a session. There are some spots still available for term 4 this year if you'd like to get in touch.
That's awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Nicola. If you have any questions, feel free. You can privately message Nicola now in the chat over on the right. But I will say, Nicola is the only person I've ever seen have nearly 200 Year 9 boys completely silent with headphones on listening to her teaching. It's pretty extraordinary. And she is a woman after my own heart because she does track what she does, because one of her goals was to get to 1 million mindful minutes in 2020. And when did you achieve that, Nicola?
We smashed it. We got to that at the end of term 2, and it kind of crept up on us because, well, term 2 was a bit of a write-off for everyone, I know, but we had a couple of schools still doing their 2 5-minute sessions each day, and that is how we calculate our mindful minutes. So it just crept up. So we've got to reset our vision and our goal to see where we can get to.
Yeah. That's awesome. All while having a 1-year-old. So yeah, it's extraordinary effort. And the impact that you're having on young people is just absolutely phenomenal. So thanks for joining us and thanks for sharing what you do.
Thank you again for having me and for creating such a wonderful opportunity. I will hang around, so please get in touch if you have any questions or you'd like any more information. That was a very rushed brief overview of what we do. Have a great afternoon, everyone.
Awesome. Thanks, Nicola. Okay, so hopefully you've got the idea. We're going to, I'm just going to go to my next slide. So we're going to, and Siri's talking to me. So we're going to change up with a couple of different activities. I'm going to give you a chance to reflect on some of the stuff that we go through today. And by all means, as I said, reach out to any of the people that are here sharing their work as well, if you would like to. Now, one of the things that I want to talk about today is the Australian Student Wellbeing Framework. And the reason why I think that this is really important is because it's a document that was released not too long ago. So it was released in October 2018. Now, for those of you who don't know me, I was teaching full-time up until the end of last year, and I was full-time in a school. And the Australian Student Wellbeing Framework, I think, is such a great framework from which we can self-evaluate our practice and reflect on our practice in schools in the way that we support student wellbeing. But it's actually something that I never came across as a teacher in that final year. It was actually just through the increased amount of work I've done in the wellbeing space this year, and that's largely been COVID related, and that's kind of what's catapulted my work, I guess, in this area. But it just blew me away that this framework wasn't used more often, or I hadn't heard about it before. So it was actually the foundation document. It doesn't really supersede anything. It's kind of the first time where there's been a national education document around student wellbeing. And it's been endorsed by all the education ministers around Australia. The interesting thing is it's got 5 elements that make it up, and there's plenty of resources that you can get access to on the Student Wellbeing Hub website. But the PDF itself is actually really clear and easy to read. I'd really encourage you to access that if you haven't seen it already. Now, you can see there that the vision of this, of the framework, is that the idea is that it's a scaffold or a structure for schools to follow to create a really safe place and a place where kids are well, so that they can achieve whatever it might be that they're after. So we know that our students achieve the best academic results when they're healthy, when their well-being is good. So this framework, I think, provides some really good background into that. And as I said, it's a chance for us to maybe reflect on what practices there are in schools, what we're doing. Often a lot of things in schools for wellbeing are just a once-off event. And I think that's exactly the same thing for teachers. I was listening to a teacher webinar the other day where the lady was saying that, you know, teacher wellbeing is more than just a morning tea once a term, and it's exactly the same for kids. I think if we truly embed and if we're truly looking after student wellbeing, it's not just a one-off event. It could be events, absolutely, but in conjunction with maybe different things happening through the year, maybe a student wellbeing curriculum, and then maybe kind of some tracking mechanisms in place as well. So in the framework, there's 5 elements, and I'm hoping you can see that okay. So these 5 elements make up the framework, and underneath in that diagram there, the description is the elements. So the inclusion being inclusive and connected school communities. I'm just going to go to here. Now you can see here, this is more detail obviously about those 5 elements. And this is where I think the detail and the possibility for a self-reflection could come into place. Because what we've got up the top is we've got the elements. So the element in support, for example, so support wellbeing and support for positive behaviour. Then we've got the principle underneath. So the principle then is that second box down, which is school staff, students and families share and cultivate an understanding of wellbeing and support for positive behaviour and how this supports effective teaching and learning. And then underneath that, in all of that additional detail there, what is identified, and obviously it's research based, but what is identified as being effective practice. So in that area, for example, there's 5 different examples of effective practice. So if an area, for example, one way you might do this is you could do a self-reflection, okay, across these 5 elements. And as a school, so maybe in your teaching team or your senior leadership team or whatever role you're in, you might do a self-reflection to see where you think maybe the biggest gaps are. And you might choose to focus on just one of these elements. Now, those effective practices would actually help you identify some things potentially that you could do and add. Now, in the space of tracking student wellbeing, you can see that all those yellow highlighted bits are the parts where I think the tracking of student wellbeing is super important. Wellbeing is done in varying degrees in our schools. Some schools do it really, really well. Some schools don't do much of it at all. And in saying that, I think even in schools that are not doing much of wellbeing, there are certainly teachers in schools that are doing a really great job of it. But one of the things that I see most often, and one of the questions I'm asked most often as a consultant is, well, how can we actually get some information and track our kids? Because as teachers, we know some of the kids that are struggling. There's some really obvious kids that we go, yep, I know that I need to, you know, put in a bit of extra time, or I need to go and check in with that student. But as a teacher, there's always the fear that we're potentially missing somebody or we're missing something. And that's why I really like this framework, because it reminds us that we should be, say down the bottom of that support column, critically analysing and evaluating school data to inform decision-making in the wellbeing space. So it's kind of moving beyond events or just a curriculum, but it's actually, let's be evidence informed in so many other ways in schools. We're collecting data, we're using evidence to inform our next steps, to identify maybe the things we need to do or the things we need to offer for our kids. But unfortunately, wellbeing is sometimes left off that. And I think the framework brings us back and reminds us that it is just as important, if not more important, than learning analytics. And I think, yeah, there's certainly room for all of us to think about our practice in this area. Now, the other four presenters that I've got here this afternoon, they offer different ways of tracking student wellbeing. So the reason why I asked all four of them plus Nicola to be here today is because I think that all four of them offer really great possibilities for different schools. And I also know in the work that I've been doing with schools is that it's not a one size fits all. There is no single program that fits and suits and is contextually appropriate to every single school out there. And these providers that are here today are just doing extraordinary work. And so the idea of having them here and having them share with you what they're doing is just to give you some ideas about what might work for you. And then, as I said, you're more than welcome to follow up with them afterwards. Interestingly, earlier in this year, I wrote a LinkedIn article on tracking student wellbeing. And it's actually the thing, or the post that the LinkedIn post for me that has gained the most likes, comments, engagement of anything that I've ever posted. And I post fairly regularly on LinkedIn. And I think for me, that's just one of those things that proves that this is a really important space that we're moving into. I think COVID has enhanced our understanding of how important wellbeing is, and then people have got questions about tracking. So most of these guys that are going to share with you today, they actually reached out to me because of that post that I wrote on LinkedIn and said, hey, these are the things that we do and we offer for schools. And I figured that if I'm working in the space and I didn't really know about all of them, then I wanted to share them with you because they're really extraordinary humans and they're all in this for the right reasons. For every single one of them, this is about doing the best thing for our kids and providing them with an opportunity and teachers with an opportunity to learn more about their kids so that they can intervene. So on that note, I might hand over to Josh. So Josh has set up an app called Kinnections, and I'm just going to make him the host and he's going to chat with you about that now.
Thank you, Selena, and again, my thanks, huge thanks to you for creating this opportunity for everybody. So I'm gonna start off with the takeaway from Kinnections is that really it's an opportunity where I want teachers to capture those really important conversations they have with students anyway, and use them as a chance to identify really students who could be at risk of mental health issues before there is a risk. So the background on me very quickly is I have 16 years in my previous life as a teacher and working in the various schools. And I was lucky enough to work within all ages. So I was primary school trained. I worked in the primary school classrooms, lucky enough to work in the independent sector. So I jumped into the high school classrooms. I then also taught in some college classrooms. And then during my teaching career, I actually had a little bit of a taste in the community sector where I ran early childhood education and care centres. So over the 16 years prior to my work now, I've worked with anything from young people from 6 weeks of age all the way up to 18. So I consider myself very lucky. But what had been playing around in my mind was trying to support teachers in their incredibly overloaded capacities already, is to single in and hone in on these conversations they're having with students already, but find out some very, very key indicators that they could be at risk of mental health problems. So it was been playing around my mind, and now that I'd moved into the youth mental health space, I work with young people in residential settings. I work with people in outreach settings and community. And the one thing that is highlighted to me almost every interaction I have with young people is that had they had interactions and had they had somebody who could identify that they were at risk early on in the piece, there's every chance their outcomes would be different and more positive. So with the app itself, the idea, I'm going to go past that little video grab, which is available on my website. So the objective is that teachers have a targeted conversation with their students once a week. And that conversation centers around two very, very key questions. And the first question is to really engage one-on-one and I guess discuss with the young person what their social connections are. So who are you connected to? And it's the strength in this is the relationship that the teachers have already with the student. So tell me who are the three people that you're wanting to play with or you are playing with at recess or lunchtime. Give me three names in the classroom who you'd love to do a project or assignment with. Who are three people you'd really like to sit next to? So the young person then will identify three people that they feel connected to in that classroom and that cohort. So ABC. The teacher has the opportunity on a smart device, so it's a mobile phone or an iPad or anything they want, where they can actually capture that response in a pre-populated class list. So that student says, I'm connected to 1, 2, 3. The teacher can identify those students straight away in less than 3 seconds, tap, 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 perfect. The next question, and arguably the most important question, is centered around the positive future focus. So it's tell me something that you're excited about, something that's on your horizon that you're waking up for and you're excited about. Now, the evidence and the research tells us that it really doesn't matter what that positive future focus is. It can be the smallest of things, it can be the biggest of things, but it's something that the young person is holding on to that, again, they're waking up, they've got it in the forefront of their mind, this is happening. I'm playing sport on the weekend. I can't wait. I love my soccer, hockey, rugby, whatever it is. I'm going to a birthday party and I love going to birthday parties. Who doesn't? I'm seeing Dad for the first time in a couple of weeks. I haven't seen Dad for 2 weeks. Can't wait. I'm really excited. So the teacher in that interaction and that very short discussion says, yes, this young person does have a positive future focus, or no, they don't have something that's on the horizon that they're really hanging on to. So what then happens is that conversation has happened with every student in the class, whether it's a primary school setting, so it could be 10, 15, 25 students. It's a conversation that can take as quick as 30 seconds, but I'm hoping that it will last a bit longer than that as the teacher delves into a little bit more about understanding of the student. Following that, once every student has had that conversation, the cool stuff happens, and that's where the reporting functionality within the app sits. So all the results of those conversations are tallied up in the background, and the report that is spit out and emailed directly to that classroom teacher in a protected document format identifies the students in that cohort who aren't being picked. So it highlights those students in the class that fly under the radar, and the ones that I missed, other teachers have missed, I'm sure, but they're the ones that are sitting there that aren't getting identified as a close contact to a person. So they're at risk of isolation straight away. So that elevates their potential for poorer mental health than, say, the other person who is connected. And what it also does then is it marries up their responses to the ones who are being missed and not being identified, to the ones who also, and again, most importantly, are identifying that they don't have a positive future focus. So it's a very simple targeted tracking system. It gives the teacher that list of students who aren't being nominated and at risk of isolation, and also tells the teachers the students who don't have a positive future focus. So then the teacher has that information. And what the teacher does with that then is really the impetus to have deeper, more further conversations with that young person. Tell me about your situation. Is there things that I can help you with? What's the relationship at home with mum and dad, etc., etc. So I've tried to keep it as simple as possible. I don't want to overload teachers. I hated overloading teachers. Being a teacher, I wanted it to be admin light, but I want it to be really, really powerful and helpful for any teachers. I go into a lot more detail on the website. There is a little video grab on there. I'm available almost 24/7 if you want to call me or email me, but please, I'd love to talk more about this.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Josh. As I said, these guys, and you can tell by the way Josh speaks about this, he's in it for the right reasons. And his motivations for doing this is all about the kids and about what we can do to support our young people. So, sorry, I'm just going back to my PowerPoint. And, going back to that student wellbeing framework, it's about being evidence informed. So the thing that I really like about the reports that come out of these different apps is that it directly gives you, it pinpoints kids and the action that you can take from that is really clear. If you know in that case that there's a couple of kids that others are not identifying as a close mate, then as Josh said, that could be a small conversation. There might need to be further follow-up, but the idea is that there's no point in tracking any of this data, whether it's learning analytics or wellbeing data. There's no point in collecting it if we're actually not going to do something about it. And I really like that idea of having a user-friendly report that identifies kids. Now, just going to pause for a minute, and I'm going to ask you to write some of your comments and reflections in the chat box on the right-hand side. So I'm interested to know what your thoughts are on the Australian Student Wellbeing Framework. Have you seen it before? Have you used it before? And if you have, feel free to share some of the ways that your school has started talking about it or started implementing it. So I'm going to stop talking for a couple of minutes. So thoughts on Australian Student Wellbeing Framework. Are you using it? If so, how? In the chat box on the right. Amy, that's awesome that you're sharing that with pre-service teachers. It's really good to know that some of our young teachers are aware of it and hopefully can start to use it in their practice and encourage their schools too. Yeah, Holly, that's really interesting. If you haven't already, the Victorian Department of Education and Training have got some really interesting stuff on student voice and student agency where emotional literacy comes into it a little bit. So that might be worth having a look at as well. Joanne, do you mind just providing a bit more detail? I'd be interested to know what specialist setting you're in. Yeah, so a bit of feeling, Al, Kath, that you've seen it in school, but maybe it hasn't been used to capacity, or maybe hasn't been unpacked yet. And, you know, as I said, it only came out in October 2018. And I say only, but, you know, minus COVID, that was kind of only about 1.5 years. So yeah, hopefully people will get through it. Yeah, and Tom, sounds like you're doing some great stuff. And as I said right at the beginning, you know, there are some schools who are doing this exceptionally well. There are some that aren't, but there are some really great teachers that are really switched on to well-being of their kids. And clearly Tom sounds like he's one of them, which is pretty cool. Yeah, right, Joanne, you're at Berry Street. It's interesting. It's a great place. Okay, thanks for your contributions there. I think that's really interesting for me, and I guess it reaffirms the fact, as I mentioned at the beginning, that I hadn't been shared, or that document hadn't been shared with me last year. So yeah, potentially a self-reflection for you as a teacher, whatever your role might be, but then even going to say, if you have somebody who's in charge of wellbeing, or you have somebody in charge of students, maybe sitting down with them and thinking about ways that you could use that and start to unpack it. And I haven't gone into the resources a lot on the Student Wellbeing Hub website, but there are certainly additional resources there to support you and help you with that. So I'd encourage you to take a look. Right, I'm going to hand over to Andrew. Andrew is from Resilient Youth, and he's going to talk about the great stuff he's doing.
Fantastic. Hi there, everyone. Great to meet you all on here, and thank you, Selena, for the opportunity. I'll just pull up. Don't use PowerPoint that often. Where do I go to slideshow? There we go. Play from start. Hope everyone can see that. Yes, hello, everyone. My name's Andrew Wicking. I'm the founding director of Resilient Youth Australia, and I'd just like in the next 5 minutes or so to give you all a little snapshot, a little window into how it is that we track student wellbeing in the school context. We've been doing it since 2013. The idea, the sort of founding idea of Resilient Youth was to put a little more science into wellbeing in the school context. My conversations at the time with principals and wellbeing officers around wellbeing, when I asked a question about wellbeing or about young people's mental health, it was clearly often a sort of an afterthought, or you know, oh, the chaplain takes care of that, or that's for the house system, or something like that. I didn't feel I ever really got really good sort of answers that gave me confidence that educators and principals were on top of the wellbeing of their young people. So we developed the Resilient Youth Australia survey platform. We've surveyed since 2013 nearly 400,000 young people in grades 3 to 12, ages 8 to 18 across Australia, which represents 1,300 plus schools as we speak. What we do, and what we do primarily, is to survey students, but also staff and parents as well. We feel that whole community, that whole school approach is really important. To do it, we built a survey platform that is easy to use, easy to administer. The survey is done by young people in school in class time, and it's 60 items, 60 questions, that is. And it takes, usually, it can take the older students, you know, in sort of middle school, middle secondary and up, 15 minutes, 20 minutes. It might take some of the younger students in primary school 25 minutes, perhaps half an hour. And we've also built what we call an interactive client portal, which is a way of getting quality data, quality wellbeing data quickly to educators so that they can identify the strengths and challenges, what's going on for the young people in front of them now, to then put a positive response in place. A lot of wellbeing tools, particularly government tools, the reporting can take 3 months, 6 months even sometimes. So it's really important that it's quick, and it's about the young people in front of teachers in the classroom right now. The survey instruments we've built, we incorporate gold standard international tools in there. Our measure of mental health, I've written a peer-reviewed paper on this in the Australian Journal of Psychology, which I'm happy to send a link to anyone interested, demonstrating that our mental health data sets the Australian norms for young people aged 7 to 9. We've co-developed these tools with the University of South Australia, and we have primary and secondary school versions. It's important from our point of view that the questions we ask are developmentally appropriate, so that we're really meeting and addressing and getting young people of different ages and stages to express their needs. We also work with a whole bunch of other organisations where young people is the core concern of those other organisations. We just did a large project, for example, with Scouts Australia, measuring the wellbeing and resilience of Scouts across the country. So the three key principles, just as a way of just breaking out for you what it is we do. We've got a purpose-built platform. Purpose-built means for use by the students and parents and teachers, the survey platform itself. It's got to be quick, it's got to be smooth, it's got to be reliable. We measure close to population, so we're not really sampling, we're measuring the whole school or whole year levels. Also purpose-built in that it gets, we hope, reports that are easily interpreted and understood quickly to educators. We want to get past any data anxiety. We want the data to be obvious and transparent and get quickly to the issues. We hope it provides a depth of insight and that it can inform direction. Wellbeing tracking and surveys can be used, of course, as a sort of pre and post measure to, you know, understand how it is you've gone in implementing something, but they're also a great tool for setting your direction for the year ahead. Where can we put our time, our energy, our money, our focus best? Last year, it might have been Year 8 girls. Bullying might have been an issue. This year, that may not be a problem. So it's important to survey each year and to reset your direction each year. So purpose-built just means it's quick and smooth survey experience. It's all online. The reporting's interactive, so you can play with it. And it's secure and accurate that this can be done at scale. We've worked with whole city councils, for example, where they survey all students and all schools in a given city council. We have multiple reporting formats. That's really important because Selena may find this too, but I find different people have different minds for data. Some people like percentages. Some people want line graphs. Some people prefer scatter plots or whatever it might be. So we've got we present the same information in a range of different ways. We have comparison data, Australian norm data, so you can see where you're at in terms of, say, Year 7 males. You can see where your Year 7 males are compared to the norm. However, we always emphasise that in a school, the most important comparisons with wellbeing data is not between you and some school down the road, but between your students this year and them last year, between your males and your females, between your Year 7 and your Year 8. Because what we're interested in wellbeing is what your students have, not what they don't have, and what we can work with best together. And then we provide all kinds of support beyond the reports and the data. This won't be easy to take in, but this is just an example of the Children's Hope Scale is one of those gold standard instruments. One or two of the items are probably quite similar to the sort of items I think that perhaps Josh has employed in his tool as well. It's all about young people's having goals and goal setting and feeling like they can find their way to a goal no matter what obstacles might be put in their place. It's about that future direction and that future orientation. But here you can see there's all kinds of detail. It's interactive. You can see at a glance where your year levels sit. You can split out, combine, genders, combine, split out, whatever you like. You can look at items, you can look at constructs, the whole works. If anyone's interested in a test drive or would like to contact me to have a little walkthrough, please do. Happy to do that. And also, like I say, you can see here, what I presented here is a page from what we call a snapshot report. You've got some of our items, and then you've got the females and the males, and it's color-coded against the norm. So what it means is that you can look at that immediately and you can go, okay, there's an issue here with girls in Year 7. You can hone in on that directly. You can see that females are sitting 15 to 30% below the norm. You can ask yourself, what does this mean for learning? What are the challenges they face? We recommend that schools have conduct focus groups, for example, with students. This is the data, but sit down with them, have a chat, and really break it out and explore it. And use all of this information and all that you as educators already know about your young people and about your context to identify and set a direction and a positive response for your wellbeing efforts. We provide, for example, an ebook also with 101 ideas, which you're welcome to, and we write articles. This is recently in the Independent Schools magazine about how to increase student resilience. So that's...
Thank you, Andrew.
Me racing through. I hope I didn't go too over time, but thank you for the opportunity.
11 minutes, not 5, but that's okay.
Oh, sorry about that.
So it's very obvious that you're passionate about it. And yeah, this is your bread and butter. And it's so nice to have people that are such strong advocates for kids' wellbeing and mental health. So
I apologise for going over time.
Oh, don't be silly. It's all good. All right. Now, that's a really good segue though, because the thing that Andrew really touched on at the end there was about the action. And as I said before, there's no point in collecting this. We could have the best tracking systems in place, but it doesn't really mean anything unless we're actually doing something about it and we're being evidence informed in our approach. Andrew used the example, for example, I'll say there was like a bullying was quite high in a particular year level, then you would want to implement some sort of program or intervention or do something for that particular year level. And then the following year, you would want to follow that up again, resurvey them, see how they're going, and make sure that you're actually doing something for that year group if they still needed it. It's not, as I said, also not a one size fits all. So your year 9s this year might have some significant bullying problems, but next year they may not. So it may not be as simple as just putting in place just a new year 9 program. It should be cohort specific and should be adapted to the needs of the kids in that group. So one of the things that I've done this year, I've been working as a learning analytics consultant at Brisbane Grammar School. And prior to COVID-19, there was an increasing interest in data in the school, and the student wellbeing team in particular was using data more and more, I guess, as time went on. And there were people in there that were excellent at it. And there were people in that group that I think over time kind of got dragged along and were upskilled by other members of the team. Now, when I say the student wellbeing team, that was made up of the heads of year, the assistant heads of year, the counsellors, and the deputy for students. So they kind of had been working on this, but when COVID happened, the heads of year just said, okay, we need to take stock of where our kids are. The school didn't really have, they had a student wellbeing survey in place the previous year or for a number of years, but it had mostly focused on bullying. So this required, when COVID happened and home-based learning happened, it really required a rethink of, okay, what are those things that we actually need to find out about or want to find out about our kids? And then how can we intervene in the easiest way possible? So what we did was we surveyed students weekly and we asked how they were feeling, to rate the quality of their sleep, their exercise, learning productivity. Now, the key thing in all of this data for me was the visualizations and being able to prioritize kids and year groups for people to address. Now, this was a summary that a head of year was given. The red dotted line was the school average, and this is the year 6 cohort. And throughout the different surveys each week, you could see that their ratings kind of fluctuated. And there was a number of different reasons for that. But the main thing that we were focused on was providing a really individualized response to kids who really needed it. So what we did was develop this. So we, Brisbane Grammar, use a platform called Tableau, and Tableau is a data visualization platform, and they have 2 members of staff who teach, but also, have release time to build some of the data dashboards. So when we surveyed the kids, so we surveyed them through Microsoft Forms. So it wasn't a set program. We surveyed them based on basically the ideas and thoughts of the wellbeing team. And then we prioritized kids like this. Now, I haven't obviously shown you the worst ones because there were some kids that really, really struggled. But what this screen did, and it's de-identified, But this screen prioritised the kids that needed to be contacted first. So the students who were self-reporting the lowest scores consistently went to the top of the list. Any student who used a negative word to describe themselves, that was automatically flagged as red. So the head of year, so some of the year levels in this school are 280, the size of 280 kids in a year level. But we were able to visualize it and prioritize it for them. So a lot of their decision making was taken away and they could respond really quickly. One of the other things we then did was we reported back to kids. And I think that's another really important thing. Whenever we survey students, I think, and no matter what it's on, we should always provide them with feedback about what we learned from the survey. Because if we go into a survey with the express intent of hearing from kids, hopefully intervening and potentially modifying things in the future, then I think the least we can do to show our appreciation for their time and contribution is to go back and actually let them know what we found. And there were things we couldn't fix, but we acknowledged them and we owned it. And we said, look, a lot of kids are saying that Microsoft Teams is lagging and Wi-Fi connectivity is an issue. We can't fix that for you, but these are some of the things that we're going to try and do to support you. So, as I said, the visualizations really supported what we did. And then that ranking and prioritizing of kids, the automation, I guess, was what we took out of it. So we wanted to build on that even more. And we had a fair bit of momentum because form tutors started to use the data. Heads of year were using the data a lot more. But form tutors were actually getting on and looking at their individual kids. And in tutor groups, so they were still having tutor group in the morning on Microsoft Teams, and the teachers were actually able to go and check in with individual kids that they knew were struggling. So it wasn't just those 5 questions. We asked them a whole lot of other questions as well. Some of them changed week to week based on what we were learning, but it really upskilled the form tutors and engaged the form tutors in the use of data and having data-informed conversations with kids. So since then, we've built this individual care profile, and this is partly drawing in some of the information from their wellbeing, a wellbeing survey that we've done. But this is another way of automating information for form tutors about how kids tracking. So sometimes we know in tutor groups, teachers may not always be copied in on emails of behaviour, or they may not know when a student's missed a piece of assessment. What happens is when that information is entered in the student wellbeing register, it's automatically pulled into this view. So the form tutor can get on at any stage and have a look at any of those things that are potentially concerning that they could go and have a conversation about or potentially intervene in. It's been absolutely amazing, and I can't believe the huge strides that we've made in this so quickly. But what the power in this is, again, it's the automation. Teachers actually get an email automatically when their kid hits a level of 15, because we've been testing it, but 15 is about the level at which we think there should be a conversation. And so the teachers are prompted with an email. We've moved on. We're now, so instead of the old wellbeing survey, we're using the strengths and difficulties questionnaire, which you might be familiar with. Another instrument that you can use is the peer relations instrument, which is also something else that we've been using. And yeah, I've now spoken more than I should have, but simple is better. The power of automation for us and visualization was super important with wellbeing data, and hopefully we'll translate that into learning analytics as well. And we actually made as much of that data as we could available to kids. So on that note, I'm going to go back to Julian. So Julian's going to talk to you about Skodel. And one of the things I should have mentioned before is that Julian and Josh's programs can be used a number of times through the year. So it's an opportunity to check in quite regularly with kids. Whereas Andrew's from Resilient Youth Australia, his is like a once a year type thing. And they're both awesome. They've all got places, but I just wanted you to be aware of that. So Julian, it's over to you.
Thank you, Selena. So sharing my screen, that's all good, everyone can see. My name is Julian Fagan, as Selena mentioned. I'm on my identical twin brother's account there, Ian. But my name's Julian, and I'm one of the founders here at Skodel, and we've developed Skodel Check-In, which is a fast, fun, and simple way for schools to see how their students are feeling. I'm really excited to present a little bit about Skodel Check-In, but I did want to touch on, firstly, the topic at hand here, which is looking at the challenge of tracking student wellbeing in schools. So we've spoken about schools being slightly time poor, they're a busy school environment, and that is of course one challenge. But I wanted to focus in on two key areas here, which are looking at defining wellbeing, firstly. So when you're setting out to set up a system to track student wellbeing, one of the things you have to consider is, and I spoke with a school recently that basically had a blank canvas here, and they were setting their systems up, and they wanted to know, what questions do we ask the students? What domains do we track? Because there's an infinite number of domains you can track. Sleep, friendships, family, exercise, diet. And so you have to consider which of those domains you want to track and how you can account for all of those domains as well, if possible. And the second part there that's very challenging for schools is that very few students speak about their well-being. So it's constantly changing, and we at times can lack visibility on how students are feeling. So in a busy school environment, where do students have that moment in time where they can express what's on their mind? You know, teachers moving from classroom to classroom, potentially having friends look at them, judge them as they go to speak to teachers. It can be very intimidating. And so the challenge there for schools is, how do you start the dialogue? So hopefully over the next few slides, I can shed some light on how we do that, firstly at Skodel, and also some things to consider if you're setting up a system to track student wellbeing. And the first thing we looked at is, what is effective wellbeing management in schools? So what's an effective wellbeing structure look like? And as Selena was talking about, a lot of what we do here as a group, all of us, we offer different ways, and there is no silver bullet that tackles all of them. And so there's potentially 3 pillars here which we've considered that you might want to look at. So firstly, teacher observations, large-scale surveys, regular check-ins, and they all work hand in hand. So, you know, as Selena was talking about with teacher observations, there's those 20% of students you know are doing really well, 20% that are probably you're confident are doing really poorly, and then there's that 60% where you're a bit unsure and you might have to guess. And that's where the idea of a regular check-in comes into play, and that's what Skodel check-in is. So it's this idea of, if you do it correctly, then you can encourage and empower students to communicate and what's on their mind and express themselves more frequently. And then you start to build that trust between teachers and students. So the conversation shifts. Students start to open up about hopes, dreams, vulnerabilities, fears, and then you have more meaningful conversations within the school community. One advantage we have when we're setting up a system to track wellbeing is that students actually want to express themselves. So there's this idea that because of the statistics around mental illness and students not speaking up about it, that they don't want to do this. But we see that with social media, they engage with forms of self-expression if it's done correctly. So for example, on TikTok, students are now using code words to express suicidal thoughts. But the problem with social media is that it's very much a broadcasting tool. So you lend yourself to unsolicited advice, trolls, predators, and it's not a very productive environment to have these sorts of conversations. But they can teach you a lot, or social media, can teach you a lot about how to engage students with forms of self-expression. And that was very much the inspiration behind Skodel Check-In, about tapping into those same emotions, but instead of it being a broadcasting tool, it being a listening tool. A few screenshots here of the Skodel Check-In platform, just to give you a feel for it. I wanted to bring your attention to this idea here of positive key drivers and negative key drivers, and sort of circle that back to the idea of what domains should we be tracking with student wellbeing. And our approach with this at Skodel was that we don't prompt students to tell us about their diet or exercise, family, relationships. We give them a platform where they feel comfortable to self-determine. So let them tell you what's important to them, and naturally you see the biggest drivers and influences of wellbeing filter themselves up to the top, so that you have visibility across that as a school. And you'll see patterns and trends emerge really quickly. We saw from students using Skodel Check-In for year 6 transitioning to year 7, friendship spike. During remote learning, family becomes such an important factor for the student's well-being. And so something to consider when you're setting up a system is, how do you let students self-determine? And then once you've set this system up, there's this really important piece, which is to respond to the data and act on it. So our mission at Skodel is to give every student a voice that is heard and acted on. And when it comes to understanding and responding, you do need that clinical expertise. There's tricky conversations that can come on the back of this. You know, students opening up about exam stress or being bullied, and that presents really meaningful conversations, but can be quite tricky. And so we've partnered with Andrew Fuller, who's got a bank of resources that in this area that act as response guides for schools to at times give them conversational guidance. So if a student says that they're stressed about an exam, how might you respond to that? If a student says they're being bullied, how can you respond to that? And even positive expressions from students, such as, I want to be a makeup artist when I grow up. How do you support a student in achieving their dreams, and what does a conversation look like there? But what really impressed us with Andrew as well, and he opened my eyes certainly to this, was this idea. He's based a lot of his philosophy on is that schools have a lot of resources at their disposal to manage student wellbeing. PE departments, music, art, tutor groups, they're all resources that schools can use to support student wellbeing. And Andrew's a real expert in squeezing every ounce out of those to do so and build school communities, not necessarily by changing in any way through a grandiose plan, but just small minor tweaks to an existing school community so that they can develop a culture where students feel connected, protected, and respected, as Andrew says. So we're really excited. Actually, we've announced this partnership today to be working with Andrew and look forward to him building out the resources on our platform to support responses to the data that's picked up. I've kept it pretty short. I'm not too sure how long that was, Selena, but I guess short's a bit better than being overly long. So I hope you found some of this beneficial as you look to set up systems around tracking student wellbeing. And of course, if you do have any questions here, then my email's there, julianfagan@skodel.com.
Awesome. Thanks, Julian. Nailed it. All right. I'm going to go straight over to Tim. So Tim's from Champion Life. And the thing I really like about Champion Life is it's just totally different again. And the focus is about also on incorporating physical activity into wellbeing. So I'm just going to hand over to you now, Tim.
Does that come up for you now?
Yep, that's good.
You've got that first slide? Okay, all good. Okay, so yes, thank you for the opportunity. We're obviously a bit close on the end of time, so I'll move along quite swiftly. But and we are a little bit of a different approach. So essentially, Champion Life is an online program designed to monitor and support students in fitness and wellbeing. And the concept or the foundation of the program was all about embracing children of all physical abilities and doing this through fun activities and challenges based on exercise and dance steps and things like that, and designed to not necessarily need equipment. So, it's phased through this concept of virtual mentoring, encouraging physical movement, and then doing wellbeing check-ins to be able to monitor what this is doing, with that over premise that, physical activity with wellbeing monitoring leads to, being able to measure better mental health and physical health as well. Right. Do you have that video on the side? Can I flip that off? Yes. There you go. Okay, so I think there's a lot of research out there, obviously, but in just the high points here, the physical guidelines we see, only 20% of Australians, youth is really involved in the degree of physical activity they need. 1 in 7 have some kind of mental health issue. Things like screen time, most students are well and truly over what is recommended as appropriate screen time, and and there's a very little amount of students really participating in that 12 to 17-year-olds in terms of physical activity on a daily basis. I'm just having a little trouble indexing my slide here. There we go. So the problem really comes down to this concept of low activity and poor lifestyle choices, particularly maybe in food, and the over kind of problem at the moment of what COVID is bringing in terms of the attention to the community, and this all comes down in mental and physical wellbeing crisis really, and the one thing that's changed over the years is that the schools are expected to really be solving this now, where previously it was more of a domain of parents to resolve these things, but the onus is very much upon the school to be involved these days. So what is Champion Life? It's essentially, we do a virtual role model led exercise routines where we do a body set in a class. They're really driven from, provided from K to 8. Most of our product goes into primary schools. The body sets like brain breaks. That picture probably gives you a good idea of what it looks like inside a classroom. These are delivered to the teacher, every day. There's no need for programming or creation. They're all set in play and aligned to the curriculum. And then we do challenges, which are really designed to 4 to 6, where they can be done outside the school. The student actually looks at that virtual role model, watches the video, then actually practices that actual challenge, can video that challenge and load it back up into the system. They can also be done in class if there's not technology and bandwidth in the school, and it needs to be done using school technology. And at the same time, what we do is a wellbeing monitor, and it's a simple check-in. We do it when the student logs in and when they actually upload the challenge, or we do it within the classroom as a check-in for all students via the teachers' technology. Bear with me. So I'm having to use my mouse to roll the slides for some strange reason. So we do this with a simple emoji. I know a lot of the other presenters today talked about much more complex systems. We're doing it with a simple 5-scale emoji, from a sad face to a very happy face. And as I said, they do it as they log in and when they complete that task. But the essence is to collect a lot more data. So with the challenges, we normally recommend about 3 a week. So we're picking up 6 data points on a constant basis as well. And then what we do is we provide dashboards so the teacher or the wellbeing supervisor can see at a glance the data that's being collected. If there's outliers that are scoring very low, like a 2 down here for Stevie Smith, then the wellbeing officer or the principal or whoever's elected or the teacher would actually get an email saying there's someone scoring low on the scale on a regular basis. And the concept is that we're just providing a lot more data points on a regular basis. And because the student's just filling in something simple as an emoji scale, they're having the ability to say, I'm not being surveyed, I'm not being questioned, but I'm very comfortable with this social media kind of way of reporting. At the end of term, we'll put together a report that is really, designed at a principal level about involvement in the program, who's using the program, to what degree, and to what degree of physical activity is being improved, and also be able to actually look at things like, how you've done a check-in, done some physical exercise, and had a positive outcome, so you're improving on that wellbeing monitor of how you're responding to that data. So, yeah. So that's actually my last slide. So I hope that makes sense. It's the elements are really about body sets, brain breaks, challenges for the students, regular check-ins, and then being able to utilise that data, and then the school make appropriate decisions based on that data. Yeah.
That's awesome, Tim. Thank you very much.
Excellent.
Okay, well that brings us to the end. Our very last slide for tonight, we've got all the contact details on here. I will, for everybody who's registered, I'll send out the recording for this to you, and I'll also send out the PDF. So you're going to have access to, obviously, their contact details. And there's a couple of people that mentioned potentially I might get some, if there's any additional information from our presenters that they want to send out, we might do that as well. But I hope that this session tonight has given you an opportunity to maybe think about tracking student wellbeing in a slightly different way. Hopefully you've got some different ideas on how your school or how you might try to approach that in your classroom. But ultimately, it's about us providing an opportunity to, or finding an opportunity to collect our wellbeing data, to track and monitor how kids are going over time, and then to put in place some really definitive and tangible steps to support our kids as best we can. We all got into teaching for the same reason. It's about young kids, about young people. It's about doing whatever we can to support them and improve their outcomes. So I just think that tracking student wellbeing and collecting that data is just such an important part of what we do. So thank you so much for joining us tonight. Thank you so much to those 5 presenters. You're extraordinary humans. I'm so proud of the stuff you're doing for our young people. They're so lucky to have you. So thanks for joining us, and hopefully you can join us at the next webinar in October. Thank you.
Selena.
Thank you.
Yeah.